Well, happy Friday, everyone. Hope you're doing well and have enjoyed your week and are looking forward to a good weekend. And we're going to get on with our usual fare. This week, my shout outs are actually I got mail, but I know who it's from the return address. So we're going to open it and let's have a look, shall we? Oh, isn't that a pretty card? Whoops, I guess it goes that way. There we are. And inside it says, just sending a hug. Meow meow for the kitty. Hi brother, was thinking a little hello would be nice. From Dad's Piranha. If you haven't checked out Dad's Piranha, it's actually the full name of the channel is Dad's Piranha Pipe Carvings and Metal Detecting. I'll put links to all three of these down in the description box so you can check them out. And Dad does some beautiful, beautiful pipes. He makes from, well, I was going to say from scratch, but he actually makes them from antlers, from elk and deer and whatever you can get his hands on. But he just makes these absolutely gorgeous works of art pipes. So check out Dad's Piranha Pipe Carving and Metal Detecting. And then it says, signed Down the Wormhole. Well, that's Dad's Piranha's wife, Dee, has her own YouTube channel called Down the Wormhole, and her channel is dedicated to pets, primarily to fish keeping, but they also have other pets as well. Everything from a snake to, I believe, hamsters to you name it. They have all kinds of pets, and so her channel is dedicated to pet care and fish keeping. So check out Down the Wormhole and show Dee some love. And then down in the corner it's signed Eva, and Eva is their daughter, and Eva has a channel as well, but I should have looked this up ahead of time. I'll put the link in the description, but Eva has her own little channel of, she does arts and crafts and things like that. So you can check her channel out too. Eva, I apologize. I should have looked up the name of your channel before I started recording this, and I didn't. Bad me. So anyway, it's Ryan, Dee, and Eva, and Down the Wormhole, Dad's Piranha Pipe Carvings and Metal Detecting, and I want to say Eva's Crafts, and I can't remember. But anyway, it'll be in the description, so please check all three of them out. And there you can have a look at the inside of the card. Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, Dee, and Eva. I enjoyed getting that. It's always nice to find something in your mailbox, isn't it? All right. Let's actually... Eva's channel will be up here in the bubble when you watch this, so I'll look it up and it'll be up there. And hopefully Eva will be gracious enough to forgive me for mucking that up. Well, last week, as you remember, I read chapter 1 of The Answers Man, a Frank and Abby mystery. And I asked people to let me know what they would like, if they'd like a chapter a week or a chapter a month. And the majority said a chapter a week because they're afraid they might forget in a month's time what had happened in the first chapter. 2 people said a chapter a month. One, her reasoning was she didn't want to miss my cooking videos. Well, those are separate. So Tuesday is cooking videos, Friday is shout outs, story, and groaner. So reading a chapter a week will not affect the cooking videos. And the other person said they enjoyed my history stories and that as well, and so didn't want to miss on those. Well, once we finished The Answers Man, we will go back to doing some of those as well. All right, so we are going to continue because this is a Democratic channel and the majority voted a chapter a week. We will continue with The Answers Man, chapter 2. As soon as I find the beginning of chapter 2. I'm not very prepared today, am I? I think they might come and take my Boy Scout merit badges away from me. There we go. And if you remember, the first chapter was all about setting up their office in the small town of Ryerville, and Abby volunteering her services to Frank as a receptionist/secretary, and they were having a pretty quiet time. And the last sentence, or last 2 sentences of chapter 1 were, business was definitely not booming. I feared Abby might start thinking that having her mom drive her nuts might be less boring than being here. That, however, was about to change. Chapter 2. Several uneventful weeks had slipped past without as much as a phone call. I was starting to question my wisdom at trying to earn a living this way, and wondering what other options in the way of self-employment might provide sustenance, when fate stepped in. After my devotional time on Friday morning, I went to the coffee shop and enjoyed a mug of Java and a side of toast while learning the advantages of using Roundup-ready canola seed versus other varieties, and listened to the latest local news. Following this enlightening hour, I strolled by the drugstore and picked up a newspaper, then returned to the office. I was surprised to find Abby at her desk, looking very businesslike rather than reading a book or doing a crossword puzzle. Then I noticed a very large gentleman sitting in the reception area. The man looked up at me as I entered and rolled his girth off the couch on which he was sitting. Abby got up from behind her desk and walked over between us. "Mr. Armstrong, this is Mr. Harvey," Abby said by way of introduction. "Mr. Armstrong has a serious situation which he thinks you might be able to help him with." Mr. Armstrong and I shook hands, acknowledging the formal introduction. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Armstrong. Why don't you step into my office and you can tell me how we can be of service to you?" I invited as I gestured towards my office. "Would you like a coffee?" "No thanks, I've had too much coffee already today. Please call me Fate. It's a nickname my father gave me." "All right, Fate. Come on in and have a seat. Abby, why don't you sit in on this and you can take notes?" I knew she was dying to know the reason for Fate's visit, and this way I wouldn't have to retell all that had transpired after he left. Once we were settled in the office, Fate took a deep breath and launched into his request. "I need you to find the answer to something which has been troubling my church family for 3 days now. When I drove into town and saw your window, I just knew you were the right company to handle this. Please say you will take this case. You've just got to. If you don't, we may never know what happened to Pastor Wainwright," he said with childlike desperation. He and Abby looked at me, awaiting my response. I leaned forward, cleared my throat, and calmly said, "Fate, I can't commit to anything until I hear exactly what it is you want me to do. There are some things which are beyond my abilities, and I would be a fool to take on a case for which I have no chance of finding an answer. So why don't you start at the beginning and tell me exactly what it is that has been troubling you and your church family for the last 3 days. Then I can decide if I can be of help to you." Fate glanced at Abby as if for support, then launched into his story. "It all started about 72 hours ago. My wife, who works at our church as a secretary, went for lunch, leaving Pastor Wainwright in his office working at his desk. When she returned an hour later, he was gone. Fate looked at me as if that explained everything. I motioned with my hand for him to continue. "Well, he hasn't been seen since. He was writing his sermon for Sunday and had left halfway through a sentence, with his lunch only half eaten. The other thing is that he had, in an unhurried scrawl, written Matthew 7:15 at the bottom of the page. No one has seen or heard from him since." "I can understand your concern. Might I assume you have reported this to the police?" I asked with as much compassion as I could muster. "Oh, yes, but they're useless," he stammered. "They made us wait 48 hours to file a missing person report, and then after looking everything over, the detective said that the stress of the job probably got to him, and he's just taking some time off and has gone somewhere to unwind." "Is that a possibility?" I inquired. Fate gave me a disgusted look as if to say, "Oh, not you too," then continued, "No, definitely not. Pastor was scheduled to take his vacation beginning the next week, and I honestly can't see him just walking out without telling someone, or at the very least leaving a note as to why and where he was going. I tell you, something bad has happened to him. The whole situation just stinks." My mind was busy sorting through the various possibilities. Could he have received a phone call regarding a family or other emergency and left town in a hurry? I asked. "That was my first thought," Fate explained. "Then when he didn't call or return to the office, we checked the caller ID, but no phone calls were received during the time he went missing, and his cell phone was still in the charger in his office. He always carries a cell phone. I called his mother, the only family pastor has, but she knew nothing of and is now very worried. The police checked to see if there had been any car accidents or any John Does had been admitted to hospital, but nothing showed up. Besides, pastor's car is still in his parking place at the church. The whole congregation has been looking for him, but with no luck. He seems to have simply vanished. Will you please try and find him, or at least find out what happened to him, please? I glanced at Abby, and she gave me a look and a nod as if to say, "Go for it. We have nothing else to do." All right, Mr. Armstrong, I'll take the case. I charge $250 a day plus expenses. I require a $1,000 retainer up front and will give you an itemized account and report at the conclusion of my services. If there is any money left over from the retainer, it will be returned to you. Should the time and expenses exceed the retainer, you'll be expected to pay the balance in full within 30 days. Either way, you'll receive an itemized bill. Abby will draw up a contract, which I would ask you to sign before you leave. Does that sound agreeable? Oh, yes, we, the congregation, will be happy to pay whatever it takes to get Pastor Wainwright back. He's truly been a godsend to us, no pun intended. While Abby drew up a contract, I questioned Fate further and got such information as I needed to start looking for answers to this disappearance. The pastor's full name was Dennis Wilbur Wainwright. His time of disappearance was between 11:56 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Tuesday, June 8th. The pastor was in his mid-30s and not married. He'd been the pastor of Salem Tabernacle for 5 years and was dearly loved by most of the congregation. His office showed no sign of a struggle or any other disturbance. Other than the pastor, nothing seemed to be missing. He was normally a very organized and considerate person and would always leave Sally, Fate's wife, a note if he had been called away while she was out. This was the first time he had left the office without leaving any indication of where he was going or how long he would be gone. His home, a church-owned house, had been checked. He wasn't there, but everything else, clothes, suitcase, toiletries, were. Fate had also brought me the writing pad on which the pastor had been writing a sermon. As Fate had stated, it ended in the middle of a sentence, actually halfway through a word, and had MA 715 scrawled haphazardly across the bottom edge of the page. I made a photocopy of the page and returned the original to Fate. The pastor's car was, as stated previously, still in his parking spot at the church, and his keys were in the top drawer of his desk. In all appearances, it looked like Pastor Wainwright had simply laid down his pen and walked out. After Fate had signed the contract on behalf of the congregation and received a receipt for the $1,000 deposit, along with my assurance that I would get right onto my inquiries and keep him updated, he shook my hand and left. I returned to my office, sat down at my desk, looked over the notes Abby had made, and wondered what I had gotten myself into. Dear Lord, I prayed, how on earth, or perhaps where on earth, should I start to seek the answer to this disappearance? So what does it say? Abby's voice cut through my prayers. What does what say? I responded with a puzzled look. The Bible verse, it must be a clue. She looked like a child who had just been handed a new toy. What Bible verse? I queried. The one Pastor wrote on the bottom of his sermon notes, MA 715. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my rather worn NIV Bible and flipped it open to Matthew. I knew it, and I told Mum so. I just knew you were a believer, Abby said. Well, now, don't jump to conclusions, I hastily stated. Just because I keep a Bible on my desk doesn't necessarily mean I'm a Christian. Lots of non-Christians own Bibles. Oh, I'm not basing my assumption on just that, she defended her position, but also on the fact that it is so well used, and I'm pretty sure you were praying when I walked in. I had to laugh. Okay, Sherlock, you got me. I am indeed a devout, practicing, and openly willing to admit it, Christian. I have been since I was 17. I actually grew up in the church, but didn't accept Jesus as my savior till I was 17. Does this mean you no longer want to work for me? I queried. Oh, quite the opposite, Abby responded. It will be refreshing to work with a fellow believer for a change. At my last job, I had to keep quiet about my faith because it was a public/government office. Well, I must say, I'm pleased to know I can now be open about my faith. Say, I always start my day with a time of devotion, Bible study, and prayer. Would you like to join me? I looked at her expectantly. Oh my, yes, that would be great. I'd love to. Now, Mr. Harvey, enough of your procrastinating. What does the scripture say? I quickly found Matthew 7:15 and read, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves." Now, what on earth could he have been trying to tell anyone with that? I thought out loud. I looked at Abby. What do you get out of that? It's a bit strange. She then looked at me and said, could it be Mark 7:15 instead? What a mind. Perhaps she should be the one looking for the answer. I hadn't even considered it to be anything but Matthew. I really needed to start thinking outside the box if I was going to make a living at this. I flipped over to Mark 7:15. Quote, "Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them." Unquote. Well, if that's the verse he meant, then it's even more mysterious than what we had before, I quipped. However, as Malachi is the only other Bible book starting with M.A., and it only has 4 chapters, it must be a reference to either Matthew or Mark. What do you think? Abby's brow creased in serious thought. Maybe he meant both, and that's why he didn't put anything after the A. Wow, now that's really confusing, I responded. Although you might be right, I wonder if he would be thinking that clearly if he was in some sort of danger. For the moment, though, let's say he was. What could he be trying to tell us with the Matthew verse? We both reread the verse of Scripture and pondered it in silence. After what seemed like an eternity, I looked over at Abby and asked, "What have you come up with?" Well, perhaps another pastor in town isn't really a believer, and Pastor Wainwright found out and threatened to expose him. So the other pastor kidnapped Pastor Wainwright or killed him to protect his secret, making the other pastor the wolf in sheep's clothing referred to. But that seems a bit far-fetched. I have to agree that does seem a bit too much like a TV movie scenario, but you never know. They say life can be stranger than fiction. I leaned back in my chair and clasped my hands behind my head. But you may have something with the idea that there is a non-Christian churchgoer involved. We seem to be thinking along the same lines. What did you come up with? Abby inquired. I came up with basically the same thing. I believe Pastor Wainwright has been kidnapped by someone he knew and suspected of not being what they were pretending or appeared to be. It's a place to start our inquiries anyway. I guess I should drive over to Lauder City and check out the pastor's office and home. I also want to talk to Fate's wife, Sally, as she was the last one to see him. Do you want to come with me? I raised an eyebrow questioningly. I would love to, but I need to stay close to town in case Mum needs me, Abby said. Maybe in the future, with more notice, I could arrange for Wally, one of my cousins, to watch Mum, and then I can go with you. Right. Well, then I guess I better get going. I would like to get back before dark. I picked up my keys and grabbed my cell phone from the charger. I never thought working here would be this exciting, Abby said as I slipped into my windbreaker. I figured we would be mostly looking up stuff on the computer for people who didn't know how to do it themselves. This type of job makes it seem more like a detective agency. I smiled at her enthusiasm. It does seem that way, but we must remain firm in our stance that we merely find answers to people's questions and problems. I don't want to be charged with running a detective agency without a license. Perhaps you should consider getting your private investigator's license. Then you wouldn't have to worry about appearances and walking that fine line, Abby stated matter-of-factly. With that wise advice floating around in my brain, I headed out the back door to my car and headed to Lauder City. And that's the end of Chapter 2. So next week, tune in to this station, same time, same place, for Chapter 3 of The Answers Man, a Frank and Abby mystery. There we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2. And as I say, next week we'll do Chapter 3. Hey, Brittany. Come here. Yeah, you just like to be in here, don't you? Yeah, say I'm the mascot, I need to be in here. Okay, should we tell him a groaner? What do you think? Yeah, Bruin, should we tell him a groaner? You think that'd be a good idea? Yeah, it's time for the groaner, isn't it? Alrighty. Well, what should we tell him about? You don't know? You don't want to tell me a cat joke? No? Oh, okay. Well, our groaner this week is of a religious bent, and although it mentions denominations, I hope no one will take offense because none is intended. But back in the 1960s, in a town where it was mostly Roman Catholic, the vast majority of the population, and in one particular neighborhood that was 99% Roman Catholic, a family moved in who were not Roman Catholic. They were Protestant. And the Roman Catholics were very friendly. They made the family welcome and welcomed them to this town and to the neighborhood and brought goodies over for them and helped them any way they could. And it was great. The family loved it. And all was going well until the end of the first week when Friday rolled around. And all the devout Roman Catholics of this neighborhood sat down to their Friday fish suppers. And just as they were about to eat, I smell beef. I smell barbecue beef. And all through outhouses in that neighborhood, people were sniffing in the air and going, yeah, it sounds like... And of course, out the doors they go and they look, and, well, here on the deck behind his house is the Protestant father of the family with his barbecue going and big, thick, juicy T-bone steaks barbecuing on the grill. The smell is just driving the neighborhood crazy because they're sitting down to fish dinners. And they said to the fellow, he says, you know, Friday we usually eat fish. And he goes, oh, that's right. I remember that about Catholics. I heard that somewhere. But he said, I'm not Catholic, so it doesn't apply to me. So we're having steak. Oh, well, you know, it makes it pretty hard on us when we're trying to eat fish and we can smell that delicious, lovely aroma of barbecuing beef. And he goes, oh, well, I'm really sorry about that, but, you know, why should I conform to what your beliefs? And he says that, you know, just close your windows or do whatever you have to do to not smell it. Well, they begrudgingly have to admit, you know, he's right. There's no law against barbecuing beef on Friday if you're not a Catholic, so what could they do? Well, this goes on week after week. It seems like every Friday he chooses to barbecue some kind of beef, and the aroma just driving him crazy. So they finally go to the priest. Father O'Malley, we have this problem. What's that, he says. So they explain to him the situation, and Father O'Malley thinks about it carefully and says, well, I can only see one solution to this. And they go, oh, what, lift the ban on having anything but fish on Friday? Oh, no, we can't do that. That's an age-old tradition. He says we can't do that. No. The only solution I can see is we need to convert this new family to Catholicism. Oh, they said, that's a good idea. How do we go about it? So they put their heads together and they think, and they all start working on it slowly. And over a course of months, they work on this family. And sure enough, they invite them to church, and they come, and eventually the family decides that, yeah, the Catholic Church is pretty nice and the neighborhood's friendly and they like everybody, and Father O'Malley seems like a decent chap, and so they decide to join the Catholic Church. Well, time goes by, and of course they have to go through the proper classes and training to learn about Catholic doctrine and catechism, and you know, it's almost a year since this whole process starts. They finally have decided to take the last final step and convert to Catholicism. So being they've already been baptized and confirmed in another denomination, the priest thinks, well, can't really ask him to be baptized and confirmed again. So he talks to his bishop, and the bishop says, well, here's what you do. So Sunday rolls around, and they have a special mass, and the family come forward, and they kneel at the altar rail, and the priest comes along with holy water and a dispenser, and he sprinkles it over them. He says, you were born Protestant. And he shakes holy water on each of them. He says, you were raised Protestant. And he shakes holy water over each of them. And he says, but now you are Roman Catholic. And he shakes holy water over each of them. And the whole congregation just breathes a sigh of relief. Phew, finally. After a whole year of putting up with this lovely aroma on Friday, we don't have to do it anymore. So the week goes on as usual, and come Friday, people are sitting down to their Friday fish suppers, and all of a sudden, that's beef. I smell beef. They rush out of their homes, and well, here's the Protestant standing on the back deck of his house, barbecue going, some big flank steaks barbecuing on there, and he's got a shaker of water, and he's standing there going, "You were born a steer, you were raised a steer, but now you're a fish." There you go. Groan. Hope you enjoyed it, and as I say, no offense intended, so please don't take any. Until Tuesday, when we have our next baking video, take care, stay safe, and God bless.